I noticed a change in my neighbour 3 weeks ago. At first it was almost nothing, something invisible to everyone else. A slight shift in the rhythm of his days, a light that stayed on later behind his curtains. A silhouette that now appeared every morning on his balcony, a steaming cup resting between his hands. I couldn't really explain why I noticed it. Maybe because my own life had become quiet. Too quiet. When every day looks the same, even the smallest detail starts to matter. I've lived in this building for almost 6 years. 6 years of quiet routines. The same stairs, the same mailboxes, the same neighbours exchanging polite smiles in the elevator and making small talk about the weather. He lived right next door. Apartment 27, mine was 26. For all that time, he had been nothing more than a presence, a voice sometimes heard through the wall, the sound of a key turning in a lock, footsteps in the hallway, nothing more. And yet, 3 weeks ago, something changed. I often came home late from work. That evening, a soft rain was falling over the city, a thin rain, almost shy. The streetlights stretched their golden reflections across the wet pavement. The air smelled of damp concrete and crushed leaves. I was climbing the stairs when I saw him, sitting on the last step of the landing, alone. His gaze lost somewhere beyond the windows. He wore a dark jacket, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his hair was damp, as if he had been walking in the rain for a long time. For a second, I hesitated. Then I simply said, "Good evening." He turned his head. His eyes looked tired, but he smiled, a genuine smile. Not the kind people offer out of politeness, a real one. "Good evening." His voice was calm, deep, strangely comforting. I stood still in front of my door, just for a few seconds, then I went inside. The conversation ended there. Yet I kept thinking about that smile all evening. I didn't know why. Maybe because there was something familiar about it. Like hearing a forgotten song drifting from somewhere down the street. Like finding a memory you thought you'd lost forever. Over the next few days, we crossed paths more often, always by chance. At least that's what I told myself. In the morning, in the lobby, in the elevator at night, sometimes near the mailboxes. We exchanged a few words, simple things, how the day had gone, the weather, the little coffee shop around the corner that had recently changed owners, nothing extraordinary. And yet I found myself looking forward to those moments, waiting for them without realizing it. I started recognizing his habits. He left early, very early, usually before sunrise, and when he returned there was always a certain scent clinging to his clothes, a mix of damp wood, coffee, and cold morning air, a scent that reminded me of childhood mornings, back when my father left for work before dawn. Memories are strange. They sleep quietly for years. Then, a single scent wakes them up. One evening, as I came home carrying several grocery bags, one of them tore open in the lobby. Oranges rolled everywhere. Some bounced off the walls. Others disappeared beneath the benches. I crouched down with a sigh, and suddenly another hand appeared. He was helping me pick them up, without saying a word, just that simple gesture. His fingers brushed mine when we reached for the same orange. Nothing, almost nothing, yet I felt my heart skip a beat. Ridiculous, completely ridiculous. We were 2 adults, 2 neighbours, and still, I hadn't felt that in a very long time. That night sleep came late. I watched shadows move across the ceiling. I listened to the muffled sounds of the building, the pipes, the wind against the windows, a door closing somewhere far away. And behind the wall, his presence, invisible, but real. I closed my eyes, and I was a little angry with myself. Because I already knew what was happening. I knew I was becoming attached, and I hated it. Attachments had always cost me something. Life had taught me to keep my distance, to protect certain parts of myself, to avoid hoping too much. Hope is beautiful, but it can be dangerous. When it breaks, it often takes more with it than you expected. So I kept telling myself it was nothing, just a neighbour, just a habit, just a few conversations. But my heart refused to listen. The change arrived without a specific date, like autumn settling in before you notice the first leaves on the ground. One morning, I realised I already knew the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. I could distinguish his walk from everyone else's. The rhythm was calm, steady, never rushed. And that simple realisation unsettled me. Because you only learn details like that when someone starts taking up space in your life, even without an invitation, even without a promise. The weeks went by, so did our conversations, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes an entire hour, often outside the building, sometimes in the little coffee shop on the corner. A quiet place, with wooden tables worn smooth by time, the constant aroma of freshly ground coffee beans, steam rising from cups like a delicate fog. I loved those moments, maybe too much. I pretended not to notice, but some truths always find their way to the surface. One Saturday afternoon, we spent hours walking through the city. Without any destination, the sky was overcast, the streets were nearly empty, the wind made posters flutter against brick walls. We didn't talk much, and yet, I didn't need more. His presence was enough. People often think closeness is built through confessions. I think it's built through silence, shared silence, the kind that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable, the kind that allows you to simply exist, side by side. That day, we stopped in front of an old bookstore, a dusty storefront, books stacked all the way to the ceiling. He stood still for a few seconds, as though something had caught him. I followed his gaze. An old photograph sat in the display window, a couple sitting together on a bench. The picture was black and white. Time itself seemed frozen inside it. I turned toward him. His smile was gone. His eyes were somewhere else, very far away. "Did you know someone like that?" The question slipped out naturally. He hesitated, then answered, "Yes." Just one word, but it carried weight, a great deal of weight. We resumed walking, and for the first time I understood there was a part of him I had never seen, a part hidden behind the smiles, behind the calmness, behind the routines. That realization should have satisfied me. After all, everyone carries their own stories, their own wounds, but instead my curiosity grew. Not an intrusive curiosity, a gentle one, that strange desire to understand someone, to know what shaped them, what broke them, and maybe what might still heal them. A few days later, chance handed us another unexpected evening. A storm rolled across the city, the wind whistled against the buildings, trees bent beneath powerful gusts, windows trembled softly. Around 10 that night, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, he was standing there, a flashlight in one hand, a faint smile on his lips. "The forecast says the power might go out again." I laughed. "Did you come to inspect my candle supply?" "Exactly." This time we shared tea, a steaming teapot, 2 cups, and rain tapping against the windows like thousands of impatient fingers. The warm kitchen light cast gentle shadows across the walls. The scent of jasmine floated through the room. For a while, we talked about everything and nothing. Then silence settled between us, a different silence, deeper, more fragile. I watched raindrops slide down the glass. He stared into his cup. Then he murmured, "You know, I never imagined I'd stay here this long." I turned towards him. He seemed to weigh every word carefully, as if walking through difficult territory. "Why?" A faint smile appeared, sad, barely visible. "Because I thought I would leave with someone. I didn't say anything. Words would have been useless, so he continued. We had plans, a house, trips, simple things. Then one day, everything stopped. His voice cracked on the last sentence. Not completely, just enough for me to hear it. And suddenly, many things made sense. His distant stares, his silences, that quiet sadness that sometimes appeared in his eyes. I could feel an old pain there, not healed, only tamed, like a scar you still touch from time to time. I wanted to say something, anything, a sentence capable of easing that weight, but I knew there was no magic phrase. So I simply listened, and sometimes listening is the most beautiful form of presence. Eventually he smiled, a real smile, tired, but sincere. "Sorry. I don't talk about that very often. You don't have to apologize," he nodded. Then we changed the subject, but something had shifted, an invisible door had opened, and behind that door was the truth, his truth, and soon, mine. Because that night after he left I stayed awake for hours. Memories surfaced one by one, memories I had carefully locked away, faces, promises. A story I believed was over, a story that left me carrying a constant fear of losing what I love. That was why I kept my distance. That was why I built a quiet life, predictable, protected. I had loved someone once, deeply, and when that person left, they took a version of me with them that I never got back. Since then, I had been surviving more than living. I worked, I slept, I filled my days, but something was missing, something I refused to name. Then he appeared, without intention, without effort, and little by little, the walls began to crack. That realization terrified me, because loving again meant taking a risk. The risk of pain, the risk of loss, the risk of having my heart broken a second time. For several days I tried to create distance. I answered messages later, found excuses, came home later than usual. I convinced myself it was necessary, reasonable, smart. But every time our eyes met, something inside me protested, as though a part of my soul refused to run away. One evening I came home particularly late. The city was quiet, the streets nearly empty, the air smelled of wet earth after a day of rain. As I approached the building, I saw him sitting on the bench by the entrance, alone, hands in his pockets, watching the streetlights. I stopped. He looked up, and immediately I knew he had noticed my absence. People always know, they feel it, when someone begins pulling away, even quietly, even without words. You okay? The question was simple, but it carried more than that. I sat beside him. The wood of the bench felt cold. The wind drifted softly between the buildings. For a few seconds I didn't answer. Then I exhaled. I think I'm scared. He turned toward me. Of what? The answer caught in my throat. Because it was obvious, too obvious. I was afraid of attachment, afraid of hope, afraid of whatever was growing between us. So I simply stared ahead. And he understood. I saw it in his eyes. That silent understanding, almost painful. He lowered his gaze, then whispered, "Me too." Those 2 words crossed the night. They passed through my defences, my excuses, my certainty, me too. No explanation needed, no details required. I knew exactly what he meant. We were 2 people marked by the past. 2 people who had learned to survive alone. 2 people watching something new emerge between them. And neither of us knew what to do with it. That truth brought us closer than all our previous conversations. The silence that followed was enormous, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like shelter. The streetlights cast golden halos across the sidewalk. The city seemed to hold its breath. Then he smiled. A quiet smile, almost shy. I had never seen him look that way before. And my chest tightened, because in that exact moment, something important was happening. Something fragile. Something precious, like a flame protected from the wind. I still didn't know where this story would lead us. I didn't know whether we were brave enough to face our fears, but for the first time in a very long while, I no longer wanted to run. And in the way he looked at me, I had the strange feeling that he felt exactly the same. A gentle feeling, almost unreal, like the moment night slowly begins to surrender to dawn. And somewhere deep inside me, despite every resistance, despite every scar, a quiet certainty was beginning to grow. The neighbour next door was no longer just a presence. He was becoming someone whose absence would now carry weight. The days that followed our conversation on that bench felt different, as if something had changed in the air, not around us, inside us. I continued living the same life. The same alarm clock, the same commute, the same streets, the same routines. And yet, everything seemed slightly brighter, more alive. I noticed details more often, the morning sunlight on building facades, the distant birdsong before the city awakened, the aroma of coffee drifting from outdoor cafes, the laughter of strangers crossing paths, as though my heart, dormant for so long, had quietly begun paying attention to the world again. And every evening, almost naturally, our paths found each other, sometimes in front of the building, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes simply through illuminated windows. Neither of us tried to rush anything. Perhaps that was what made it so precious. There were no promises, no labels, no dramatic declarations, just 2 human beings, 2 lonely souls who had learned to recognize one another. One Sunday morning, I woke before dawn. Sleep refused to return. The sky was still dark blue. The city floated in that peculiar silence that exists just before sunrise. I made myself a cup of coffee, then settled beside the window, and that's when I saw him, standing on his balcony, as he often did, a mug in his hands, his gaze fixed on the horizon. For a few seconds, we remained still. Then he noticed me. Even from that distance, I saw his smile appear. And I returned it, without thinking, simply, naturally. Such a tiny gesture, yet it filled me with unexpected warmth, the kind of warmth some people spend years searching for. The weeks continued to pass. Autumn moved forward. Trees slowly surrendered their leaves. The sidewalks became carpets of gold and copper. The air grew colder, sharper, more honest somehow. Autumn has always had that power. It reminds us that everything changes, that nothing remains fixed, that even beautiful things must sometimes learn how to transform. One evening, we decided to go for a walk. Again, without a destination, just like before. The wind sent leaves swirling around our feet. Storefront windows cast warm reflections into the night. The scent of fresh bread still lingered outside a few bakeries. We walked side by side, without hurry, as if the whole world had granted us that moment. At an intersection he stopped, not suddenly, just enough for me to turn toward him. His eyes searched for mine. He seemed to be thinking, then a soft laugh escaped him. "I feel like we've been circling around something for weeks." My heart immediately sped up. I knew exactly what he meant. but hearing it spoken aloud made everything more real, more fragile too. I didn't answer, not right away, because some truths require the courage. Even when they're obvious, he lowered his eyes briefly, then continued. I think I forgot what it feels like. What? His answer came gently, like a confession. To look forward to seeing someone. The silence that followed moved straight through me. I felt my defences begin to crumble. The last ones, the ones I was still protecting, because I had forgotten too. I had forgotten what it felt like to think about someone the moment I woke up, to hope I would run into them, to smile for no reason while remembering a conversation, to want to tell one specific person about my day. I'd forgotten all of it, or maybe I'd forced myself to forget, out of fear, always fear, that old fear, the one that convinces us that feeling nothing is safer than feeling something, when the truth is often the opposite. I looked at him, really looked at him. The streetlights painted soft shadows across his face, the wind stirred his hair, and in his eyes I saw exactly what lived in mine. The same hesitation, the same vulnerability, the same sincerity, so I smiled, and answered, me too. The words were simple, yet they carried months of silence, years of wounds, miles of loneliness, and the moment they left my lips I felt something loosen inside me, like a weight I had carried for far too long. He didn't speak, not immediately, but his gaze changed, in a subtle way, as though a door had finally opened. We resumed walking, even slower than before, and for the first time I stopped trying to control what I felt. I stopped anticipating future pain, stopped calculating risks. I simply accepted the moment, the fragile beauty of the moment. A few days later, winter began announcing its arrival. The mornings grew colder, the windows fogged with condensation. Heavy coats returned from closets, along with long evenings spent indoors. One rainy night, someone knocked on my door. I already knew who it was. I felt it before opening. When the door swung open, he stood there holding an old cardboard box. I have something I want to show you. We settled into the living room. Rain whispered against the windows. The light was soft, almost golden. He opened the box. Inside were dozens of photographs. His photographs, years of memories, landscapes, journeys, faces, fragments of a life. We looked through them one by one. Some made us laugh, others left us silent. Then one particular photograph appeared, an old picture, its edges worn by time. He became still, his fingers resting along its border. I understood. Without asking a single question, he was showing me part of his past, the most painful part, the most intimate part, not because he wanted to stay trapped there, but because he trusted me. That trust touched me deeply, more than any romantic gesture, more than any declaration, because it said, I don't want to hide anymore. So I shared things too. Memories I almost never spoke about, regrets, absences, old wounds. We talked for hours, long into the night, until words became unnecessary. And when he left that evening, one thing had become clear. We were no longer two neighbours. We were no longer simply two people growing attached. We had become a refuge for each other. And sometimes, in a lifetime, that is the rarest thing of all, the most precious. The month continued to pass, as they always do, bringing joy, unexpected turns, moments of fragility. We experienced doubts, fears, difficult conversations, because love does not erase wounds. It does not make them disappear. It simply learns how to live alongside them, to understand them, to care for them. And perhaps that is what true intimacy really is. Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone who accepts the imperfect parts of us. The broken parts, the quiet parts, the parts we hide from the rest of the world, even now. I sometimes think back to that first rainy evening, that stairway landing, that simple greeting, and it makes me smile, because at that moment I had no idea what was waiting for me. None at all. I thought I was meeting a neighbour, nothing more. I didn't know that behind that door lived someone who would bring light back into forgotten corners of my heart. I didn't know an ordinary presence could become essential. I didn't know a story could begin with something so simple, a glance, a smile, a conversation. So if you're listening to this story today, perhaps there is someone in your life you still see as just a presence, someone you pass without really looking, someone whose future importance you cannot yet imagine. Because the truth may be right there, the greatest connections rarely arrive with fanfare. They don't come with fireworks. More often, they enter our lives quietly, in a hallway, in a coffee shop, in a neighbourhood, inside an ordinary routine. And one day, without knowing exactly when, they become extraordinary. So before you go, I'd like to leave you with this thought. Don't be afraid of connections that grow slowly. Don't be afraid of those that arrive without certainty. Sometimes the truest stories are the ones that take their time, the ones that grow in silence, the ones that heal places they never promised to touch. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who matters. Leave a comment and tell us about the unexpected meeting that changed your life. And above all, never forget that, behind a neighbouring door, behind a quiet smile, or behind a presence you consider ordinary, there may be the beginning of an entire future waiting to unfold.